Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a brand new legal breaking reporting. In today's video, we have the fact that Democratic Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen has sent a letter to Donald Trump regarding the details of Chris Van Hollen's conversation that he had with El Salvadorian leaders. Let's get into this new reporting by CBS. The article, ladies and gentlemen, is titled, "In Letter to Trump, Maryland Senator Van Hollen Details Conversation with Salvadoran Leader About Deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia." And ladies and gentlemen, the article reads, Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen sent a letter to President Trump on Tuesday detailing the conversation he had about Kilmar Abrego Garcia with the Vice President of El Salvador. Van Hollen traveled to El Salvador in early April to check on the well-being of Abrego Garcia after he was mistakenly deported from Maryland to a prison in his native country of El Salvador. The Trump administration admitted that Abrego Garcia's deportation was due to an administrative error. He had a 2019 protective order that should have prevented him from being deported. Ladies and gentlemen, Van Hollen pens the letter to Donald Trump. Senator Van Hollen said his meeting with Salvadoran Vice President Felix Ulloa revealed that the Trump administration had not taken any action to return Abrego Garcia to the United States, despite orders from a federal judge and the U.S. Supreme Court. Quote, "Your comments and the actions of your administration clearly demonstrate your failure to comply with the court orders as you continue to violate Mr. Abrego Garcia's constitutional and due process rights," unquote, Van Hollen in his letter said to Donald Trump. According to Van Hollen, Vice President Ulloa also revealed that Abrego Garcia was still being detained because the U.S. is paying El Salvador to keep him detained. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I will add that Donald Trump broke the law by doing that. Well, you might be asking yourselves, how and what And what law did he specifically break? Well, ladies and gentlemen, he broke the law by doing that, by paying El Salvador, because paying El Salvador to detain Kilmar Abrego Garcia, because they were not approved at all by Congress. So, yeah, that is how he broke the law. They have to be approved. Funds that were appropriated by Congress have to be approved. Hence, Donald Trump yet again did not do that. Continuing with the article, ladies and gentlemen. Quote, the government of El Salvador is holding him solely at the request of your administration, and specifically because you are paying them to imprison him, unquote, Van Hollen wrote. Ladies and gentlemen, the ball is in your court. Yeah, I had to make sure I was using the correct word. The president, or the vice president of El Salvador, Felix, he said that the ball is, quote, in your court. Van Hollen detailed several moments before his conversation with Ulloa, saying that the Salvadorian vice president told him, quote, the ball is in your court, unquote, and said, and added, ladies and gentlemen, we, quote, we, El Salvador, cannot take any action because the case is still in the United States situation. According to Van Hollen's letter, Ulloa made it clear that El Salvador's government would, quote, act accordingly, unquote, once the case was resolved in the United States. Van Hollen further asked Ulloa if El Salvador had evidence that Abrego Garcia had committed a crime, to which he responded that the government does not, quote, qualify those persons who are there. We just take them, unquote. The vice president indicated that El Salvador did not look at Abrego Garcia's files, saying, quote, we have a deal with the United States government. They send people. We host them. They pay. And that's it, unquote. Van Hollen argues administration Ladies and gentlemen, Van Hollen argues the administration has the authority to return Abrego Garcia. In his letter, Van Hollen argued that the Trump administration does have the authority to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return from El Salvador, despite their opposing claim. Quote, "My conversation with Vice President Ulloa clearly demonstrates that the government of El Salvador has no independent legal basis for imprisoning Abrego Garcia," unquote, the senator wrote. Quote, "This also reveals that your administration could easily facilitate his release by letting El Salvador know that, given his wrongful detention, they are not contractually bound to continue imprisoning Abrego Garcia," unquote, he added. Ladies and gentlemen, the Trump administration alleges that Abrego Garcia is tied to MS-13. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, if they have any evidence, they need to, by federal law, put up or shut up in court. That is fancy lingo talk for present your evidence or shut the hell up. I added the shut the hell up. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not part of the lingo. In his letter to Van Hollen, in his letter, Van Hollen touches on the continued claims that Abrego Garcia is a member of MS-13. Documents detail that Abrego Garcia was arrested in 2019 along with 3 men whom law enforcement recognized as gang members. At the time, detectives noted that Abrego Garcia was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and a hoodie that were, quote, indicative of Hispanic gang culture. A source also told police that Abrego Garcia was an active member of MS-13. Court documents showed. That is a flat-out lie. They never issued or presented any evidence to the court. Trump and his administration are blatantly lying. They're lying to the American people and abusing their powers. His family and attorneys have repeatedly denied those allegations, and court records show Abrego Garcia does not have a criminal history in the U.S. or El Salvador. Quote, "You continue to put out information on social media asserting that Abrego Garcia is a member of MS-13, and Vice President Vance falsely asserted that he has been convicted of crimes in the United States," unquote, Van Hollen wrote to Mr. Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, what's next for Abrego Garcia? We will find that out. As As of April 29, Abrego Garcia remains in custody illegally and unlawfully and unconstitutionally, ladies and gentlemen. My editorial's notes. He was moved to a lower security facility in mid-April, according to court documents. A federal judge initially requested that the Trump administration provide daily updates about the actions they have taken to return Abrego Garcia to the United States, but she paused that order on April 23rd. Ladies and gentlemen, that pause is up as of today. From sources that I've heard from. Judge Zenas instead is requiring the administration to provide updates by April 30. April 30 being today, ladies and gentlemen, at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, ladies and gentlemen, which is 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Ladies and gentlemen, be sure to be on the lookout for more updates regarding Abrego Garcia and his supposed to be facilitated in a 9-0 Supreme Court order, as well as an order from the district courts, and a 2-1, or I think it's 3-1, Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals court order that was issued by the main judge that presided over his Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals case. That is going to do it for today's legal breaking reporting, ladies and gentlemen. If you did enjoy this legal breaking reporting, please consider liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. Secondly, if you want to make sure that you never miss a brand new legal breaking reporting on the side of politics, please consider hitting the bell icon that is right next to the subscribe button down below, and hitting the all notifications options. Fourthly, ladies and gentlemen, if you also want to make sure you stay up to date on all the things legal breaking reporting wise on the side of politics, please as well follow me on my social medias that I will have linked down below. I'm on Instagram, Snapchat, Threads, as well as TikTok. There I will be posting updates on when I've uploaded a brand new legal breaking reporting. Fifthly, ladies and gentlemen, please help me reach and achieve the goal of 160 plus subscribers. The reason why I'm saying 160 plus subscribers is because right after we reach and achieve the goal of 160 subscribers, we have more subscribers to reach and achieve right after we reach and achieve the goal of 160 subscribers. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, please stay safe, please stay positive, and know that justice will prevail eventually on the correct side of the law, despite Donald Trump and his illegal regime's unconstitutional and administration's unconstitutional behaviors. illegal actions, illegal abuses of power, and illegal executive orders and behaviors.